Hey everybody, J.D. Vance here, live from my office in the White House complex and filling in for somebody who cannot be filled in for, but I'm going to try to do my best, my dear friend, the great Charlie Kirk. The last several days have been extremely hard for our country. They've been hard for me, hard for my family, hard for the countless people in this building who knew and loved Charlie Kirk, and of course, they've been hardest most of all for his darling wife, Erica, and their two beautiful children. The thing is, every single person in this building, we owe something to Charlie. He was a joyful warrior for our country. He loved America. He devoted himself tirelessly to making our country a better place. He was a critical part of getting Donald Trump elected as president, getting me elected as vice president. And so much of our success over the last 7 months is due to his efforts, his staffing, his support, and his friendship. I don't think that I'm alone in saying that Charlie was the smartest political operative I ever met. Everyone knew him as this fearless debater, this guy who would take the conservative message into hostile places and inspire younger generations to have courage. One thing that's hit a lot of those young Americans over the last week was how Charlie was there for them when others were not. When they were afraid to speak their minds, when they were afraid of what a professor would say, when they were afraid that they would be shouted down by their peers, Charlie was there, showing them that they could be courageous and that they could be bold. Charlie was a visionary. He was a luminary. He brought together people. He didn't just teach people how to speak. He didn't just teach people what to say. He didn't just teach people they could actually speak their mind on campus. He created a whole social network for an entire generation of young people. I know people who met their husband, who met their wife, who met the best man at their wedding at a TPUSA event. Because as you guys all know, it's not just about speaking our mind, it's about making friends along the way and creating that support network that won an election and that staffed the current federal government. I owe so much to Charlie. I've had friends reach out in just the last couple of days who sent me messages, screenshots that they exchanged with Charlie in the run-up to me getting selected by the president as his vice presidential running mate. And it's such an honor to have people show me that Charlie said, we want J.D. to be the VP nominee. And I just had a conversation with the president, and I think things are actually going well. I think he's actually going to choose J.D. Vance. Do you know what it means to me that such a good guy, such a good friend, such a lion and visionary of our movement was advocating for me? So I wanted to use this show today to advocate for Charlie, to talk about him, to talk about what kind of a guy he was, to talk about what kind of a man he was, what kind of a husband and father he was, and to take people, most of them from inside the administration, but some of them from without, who knew Charlie best, and to talk about what he meant to them, what he meant to this administration, and what he meant to the conservative movement. Now, I was very honored a couple of days ago on September the 11th, 2025, to fly out to Utah, where Charlie was shot and killed, to meet his wife, to meet his mom and his dad, his sister, all just incredible people who didn't deserve to have this happen to them. And I was also honored to be able to take Charlie's remains from Utah to Arizona. It was an amazing, amazing thing. It was heartbreaking, and it was sad, and it was terrible. But what an honor it was for me and my family to be welcomed in to the Kirk Inner Circle at their moment of grief. There are a few things that I want to talk about just from that moment. First of all, when I first met Erica, his lovely wife, and such an incredibly brave soul. I'm not sure if you saw her remarks after Charlie died. If you haven't, I would encourage you to go and see them, because you see this raw grief and incredible courage all in the same moment. And that's what we need right now. We need to grieve, but we also need this courage in this moment more than we've ever needed it. She gave me a hug, and she was heartbroken, as of course she would be, and she said that she loved him so much. And I said, Erica, he loved you so much. He died way too young, but he died a happy man because of you, because of the family that you gave him, because of the home and the life that you guys had built together. And we sat for about an hour and we talked about Charlie. And, you know, in these moments, you don't know what to say. I'm a person who literally speaks for a living, and I had no idea what to say And I didn't try to console her, because how can you console a person who just lost a loving husband and father? But we just talked about Charlie. We talked about who he was. We talked about some of our favorite stories. We talked about some of his idiosyncrasies and all the things that made Charlie Kirk who he was. And she said something to me that I will never forget. My wife was there. It was just me and my wife on my side, and then a lot of people from the Turning Point's family, a lot of people from Charlie's family. And she said to me that Charlie never raised his voice, that he never cussed at her, that he was never cross or mean-spirited to her. And look, I'm a husband. I'm proud of being a husband. I think that on the great balance of things that I'm a pretty good husband, but I can never say that I was never unpleasant with my wife. I can never say that I've never raised my voice to my wife. Like most husbands, even the good ones, we're sometimes imperfect. And I took from that moment that I needed to be a better husband and I needed to be a better father, because of all these moments that I shared just in the last few days, the books that I've read to my kids, going up to their bedroom and kissing them and hugging them before bed. I just realized that all of these moments that I get to have, Charlie is not able to have them anymore. And Charlie's kids and his beautiful wife are not able to have them anymore. And maybe the best way that I can contribute and the best way that I can honor my dear friend is to be the best husband that I can be, to be the kind of husband to my wife that he was to his. You know, we talked all the time about the most important thing you could do is not vote for a particular candidate. It was to become, if you were a young man, a husband and a father. He talked about the joy that came from fatherhood, the joy that came from raising a family and being part of their growth and their development and all the incredible things that happen when you get to be a husband and father. And that is the way that I'm going to honor my friend, is to be the very best at that most important job that I can be. But that's not the only way that I'm going to honor Charlie. And there's going to be a lot of discussion over the next 2 hours of this radio program about what exactly that looks like. It's important, and Erica asked me this, to make sure that his movement, the movement that Charlie started, has to keep going. We have to build upon it. We have to add to it. We have to make sure that the next generation of young people feels confident and courageous to speak their mind and to speak the truth. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why do we do this. Of course, we do this so that we can enact good public policy and take back our country. We're going to talk with senior officials in the administration about what we're trying to do to honor Charlie's legacy in that way. Of course, we have to make sure that the killer is brought to justice, and importantly, we have to talk about this incredibly destructive movement of left-wing extremism that has grown up over the last few years, and I believe is part of the reason why Charlie was killed by an assassin's bullet. We're going to talk about how to dismantle that and how to bring real unity that can only come when we tell the truth and everybody knows that they can speak their mind about the issues of the day without being cut down by a murderer's gun. We're going to talk about all of those things with friends of Charlie, with people in the administration, with people that he knew. You know, on a podcast a couple of months back, Charlie was asked about how he'd want to be remembered if he died. His answer: I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. That would be the most important thing. The most important thing is my faith, and that was Charlie. And in this dark moment for our country, I think that's the greatest lesson any of us can take from Charlie. To have faith in the Lord, and to be bold in how we glorify him. To be bold in our pursuits as Charlie was in his. So that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time doing this afternoon. Keeping this incredible show he created going and hearing from some of the people who were so fortunate to call Charlie a friend. We're going to pay tribute to his courageous legacy, and we're going to commit to keep it forever alive. I'm looking forward to this. Join us.
Why wouldn't he see him? Why wouldn't he see the person who's in the chat before talking about war policy?
So, time out. Just so we're clear, I'm sure you've been added to group chats with 30 or 40 people sometimes, and you enter in with trust that every acronym is actually a government official. Obviously, that will not happen again. Just so we're clear, Signal was an approved chat by the Biden administration. It's an approved secure channel by
I'm not talking shit on Signal.
However, time out. Let me ask a question about Pete Hegseth. Would you rather have a warfighter or a bureaucrat run the United States military?
I would rather have somebody that doesn't have a history of alcoholism. I'd rather have somebody that, I mean, realistically.
Wow. So do you think how about Mark Milley and Lloyd Austin, were they better at running the U.S. military than Pete Hegseth?
I mean, I think you're going to probably start talking about how there's higher enlistment numbers.
Yeah,
under
not only
Pete
that.
Hegseth.
So recruitment in the military is up majorly. Thank you, Pete Hegseth. He's doing a pretty good job. Number two, procurement. We're saving money. Estimates are that we'll save hundreds of billions of dollars in efficiency. War games are up. The amount of war games we're doing in the Southeast Pacific has increased by 30%. This is a military town here in San Diego. They have a massive increase in people wanting to join the Navy, wanting to join the military. That wasn't happening under Biden. Morale is actually 30 points higher now that Pete Hegseth, a warfighter's warfighter, is running the U.S. military.
We have a complete difference. We're never going to agree on this.
No, but not agree, but show me, then prove the evidence. What is one number that is worse with the U.S. military now that Pete Hegseth's in control?
The numbers that you're talking about are numbers that I actually actively do not care about, because I think that we have an overly powerful military, and I think too much of our money goes to the military.
No, I know, but like, tell me one thing he's done, like numerically, like empirically, judge his performance. Right? What is one thing that you gender pronoun type policing of our military members on the front lines of combat?
See, the thing is
Pete
that
Hegseth has gotten rid of all that, but I'm saying you're trying to make a contention that he's not qualified. Okay. The military is in a much better place thanks to him only after 100 days, man. And that's that is the weakest example of all the ones that you have in the cabinet. You didn't address Rubio, you didn't address Noem, you didn't address Bessent, you didn't address Lutnick, you didn't address Bobby Kennedy, you didn't address all these people. So I have to ask you a question.
I can continue addressing people.
But every one of these departments is in a substantially and an empirically better place than it was.
Okay, including the Department of Education that's been completely defunded, and somebody who literally
I'm so glad it's being defunded.
Okay, I bet you are, but guess what? Most Americans aren't, and that's the reality.
Wrong. Donald Trump.
Okay, yeah, just because you have a bunch of people here saying that doesn't mean that's the reality.
Let me prove it to you. Donald Trump ran on a pledge to get rid of the Department of Education. We can agree with that?
No,
yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. He won a popular vote. The vast majority of people voted knowing that the Department of Education was going to get eliminated.
If you truly believe that the vast majority of people were educated enough about the fact of Donald Trump's opinion on the
voters aren't very
Department
smart. Now that's what we're going after.
No, I'm simply just responding to what you said. What you said is
insult the voters. They don't know.
No, I know a lot of people that voted for Trump who had absolutely no idea that he was going to defund and of course, this is just an anecdote, but I know that this is the truth. Not everybody, when they vote, looks at every single little thing and every little aspect like you and I might of why we would vote for somebody. Like, we're both political commentators.
Right, fine. And as a political commentator, then I will argue more forcefully against you, because now you're not just like a college kid searching for this. Has education in America improved or gotten worse since the Department of Education was formed?
It has literally been 3 months. I have absolutely no idea.
Since the Department of Education was formed in the 70s. We now have 50 years of evidence. Has American education gotten better since we've had a Department of Education, or has it gotten worse?
I personally don't think that has to do with the Department of Education.
Well, when you've spent over $4.5 trillion with one federal department, and we have 30 schools in Chicago where a fifth grader cannot read at grade level. We have 35 schools in Baltimore where kids cannot do math or reading at grade level. We cannot find a single school, not a single school in downtown Detroit, where by the time they graduate high school in the heavily black areas, that they're proficient in reading or math. We are now like 30.
Welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show. This is Vice President J.D. Vance. Joining me now is Stephen Miller, White House Deputy Chief of Staff, dear friend of mine and dear friend of Charlie Kirk's. And before I get into the nitty-gritty of what I wanted to talk with Stephen about, you know, there's a lot of questions about the investigation, where we are in the investigation. I want to be respectful to the FBI's process, but just know that we are on top of this, and the entire administration is trying to do as much as possible to find everything that we can about what led to this, about how we got here, and of course, ultimately, how an assassin took Charlie's life. I wanted to zoom out with Stephen a little bit and talk about all of the ways that we're trying to figure out how to prevent this festering violence that you see on the far left from becoming even more and more mainstream. And before I do that, Stephen, I want to do this with every guest because you're a friend of Charlie's, and one of the things I'm hoping that people get out of this is an understanding for the kind of guy that Charlie was, who he was. And so before I talk to you about what we're doing to try to prevent something like this from happening again, maybe you could just talk about why you love Charlie, what memories you have of him, something that would give our audience a sense of what he was behind the microphone.
Yeah. I've known Charlie for 10 years. He was a treasured friend. And, this is going to sound, he made you believe more in yourself, is the best way I could put that.
That's right.
He was your biggest cheerleader. He would, if I was working on a hard project, an important executive order, a major new initiative, he would give me the strength and the focus to get it done.
That's right.
He was everybody's supporter, enthusiast, cheerleader, promoter. He made all of us better every single day. The memory that I keep turning to is not a single memory. It's a period of a couple months after we won the election. And Charlie was in the campaign or the transition office every single day. And from dawn till dusk, volunteering his time to get into the weeds, the nitty-gritty of government. And he was so damn excited. I mean, it really hurts to think about it right now. He was so excited about all of us being here. And we would be talking about every executive order, every new regulation, every new policy plan. It was such a thrill for me to get to spend a few months of my life, because he came from the nonprofit, the activist world. I came from the government world. And in this transition, to be able to work hand in hand, take all of his ideas from being the leader of TPUSA, spending time with college students, spending time with activists, and then be able to be with us at the transition to plan out the next step of our government, that was an experience for which I will always be grateful. And the last thing I'll say is that, to my earlier point, Charlie would send me messages all the time, just saying, great work, or here's a new idea, or here's what I think will take this to the next level. And I took them all to heart. And God, I just love the man so much.
He was our biggest supporter, Stephen, but he was also, if he disagreed, he would figure out how to get us to get where he wanted us to go.
Yes.
Always such a big cheerleader. Absolutely right. The darkest moments of my life, it was Charlie who was on the phone saying, don't let him get to you. Keep on fighting. Keep on going. You're absolutely right. So I want to be mindful of time here. A lot of people are very worried about how we got here in the first place. And you have the crazies on the far left who are saying, oh, Stephen Miller and J.D. Vance, they're going to go after constitutionally protected speech. No, we're going to go after the NGO network that foments, facilitates, and engages in violence. That's not okay. Violence is not okay in our system, and we want to make it less likely that that happens. Walk me through, at a high level, like what you and I have been working on, what the whole administration has been working on to try to make sure that we don't reward and promote this craziness.
Yes. So it's an excellent question. I said this before, and but it bears repeating. The last message that Charlie sent me was, I think it was just the day before we lost him, which is that we need to have an organized strategy to go after the left-wing organizations that are promoting violence in this country. And I will write those words onto my heart, and I will carry them out. If people ask me, what emotions I'm feeling right now, it's just something people say. I mean, you kind of know the answer. There's incredible sadness, but there's incredible anger. And the thing about anger is that unfocused anger or blind rage is not a productive emotion.
Right.
But focused anger, righteous anger, directed for a just cause is one of the most important agents of change in human history.
Charlie showed that. Amen.
And we are going to channel all of the anger that we have over the organized campaign that led to this assassination to uproot and dismantle these terrorist networks. So let me explain a little bit what that means. So,
We've got 30 seconds, so be quick, Stephen.
The organized doxing campaigns, the organized riots, the organized street violence, the organized campaigns of dehumanization, vilification, posting people's addresses, combining that with messaging that's designed to trigger and incite violence and the actual organized cells that carry out and facilitate the violence. It is a vast domestic terror movement. And with God as my witness, we are going to use every resource we have at the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and throughout this government to identify, disrupt, dismantle, and destroy these networks and make America safe again for the American people. It will happen, and we will do it in Charlie's name.
Thank you, Stephen. Don't go away. I'll be joined by a guest of Friends just in a few seconds. See you soon.
Why wouldn't he see him? Why wouldn't he see the person who's in the chat before talking about war policy?
So, time out. Just so we're clear, I'm sure you've been added to group chats with 30 or 40 people sometimes, and you enter in with trust that every acronym is actually a government official. Obviously, that will not happen again. Just so we're clear, Signal was an approved chat by the Biden administration. It's an approved secure channel by
I'm not talking shit on Signal.
However, time out. Let me ask a question about Pete Hegseth. Would you rather have a warfighter or a bureaucrat run the United States military?
I would rather have somebody that doesn't have a history of alcoholism. I'd rather have somebody that, I mean, realistically.
Wow. So do you think how about Mark Milley and Lloyd Austin, were they better at running the U.S. military than Pete Hegseth?
I mean, I think you're going to probably start talking about how there's higher enlistment numbers.
Yeah,
under
not only
Pete
that.
Hegseth.
So recruitment in the military is up majorly. Thank you, Pete Hegseth. He's doing a pretty good job. Number two, procurement. We're saving money. Estimates are that we'll save hundreds of billions of dollars in efficiency. War games are up. The amount of war games we're doing in the Southeast Pacific has increased by 30%. This is a military town here in San Diego. They have a massive increase in people wanting to join the Navy, wanting to join the military. That wasn't happening under Biden. Morale is actually 30 points higher now that Pete Hegseth, a warfighter's warfighter, is running the U.S. military.
We have a complete difference. We're never going to agree on this.
No, but not to agree, but show me, then prove the evidence. What is one number that is worse with the U.S. military now that Pete Hegseth's in control?
The numbers that you're talking about are numbers that I actually actively do not care about, because I think that we have an overly powerful military, and I think too much of our money goes to the military.
No, I know, but tell me one thing he's done, numerically, empirically, judge his performance, right? What is one thing that you could say, wow, the Pentagon is in a worst place because of Pete Hegseth?
I would say his inconsistent foreign policy, where he backs on statements depending on whether or not Donald Trump has heard them or not. Like in the beginning, we were talking about what happened with Ukraine and Russia. Like, they've had disagreements already within the first couple months of the administration.
What? But first of all, the president is the commander-in-chief, so he executes the running of the military.
I'm just saying that
he's the operationals manager, right?
I understand that.
And so when you want a military, you have recruitment going up, you have war games going up, you have morale going up. You have, by the way, how about this? Do you agree that physical fitness standards for men and women should be the same in the U.S. military?
Yes.
Pete Hegseth is to thank for that. He has brought physical fitness standards to be the same for men and women. Lloyd Austin didn't do that. Mark Milley didn't do that. Do you also agree that we should not have transgender pronoun type policing of our military members on the front lines of combat?
See, the thing is
Pete
that
Hegseth has gotten rid of all that, but I'm saying you're trying to make a contention that he's not qualified. Okay. The military is in a much better place thanks to him only after 100 days, man. And that's that is the weakest example of all the ones that you have at the cabinet. You didn't address Rubio, you didn't address Noem, you didn't address Bessent, you didn't address Lutnick, you didn't address Bobby Kennedy, you didn't address all these people. So I have to ask you a question.
I can continue addressing people.
But every one of these departments is in a substantially and an empirically better place than it was.
Okay, including the Department of Education that's been completely defunded, and somebody who literally
I'm so glad it's being defunded.
Okay, I bet you are, but guess what? Most Americans aren't, and that's the reality.
Wrong. Donald Trump.
Okay, yeah, just because you have a bunch of people here saying that doesn't mean that's the reality.
Let me prove it to you. Donald Trump ran on a pledge to get rid of the Department of Education. We can agree with that? No, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. He won a popular vote. The vast majority of people voted knowing that the Department of Education was going to get eliminated.
If you truly believe that the vast majority of people were educated enough about the fact of Donald Trump's opinion on the
voters aren't very
Department
smart. Now that's what we're going after.
No, I'm simply just responding to what you said. What you said is
insult the voters. They don't know.
No, I know a lot of people that voted for Trump who had absolutely no idea that he was going to defund and of course, this is just an anecdote, but I know that this is the truth. Not everybody, when they vote, looks at every single little thing and every little aspect, like you and I might, of why we would vote for somebody. We're both political commentators.
Right. Fine. And as a political commentator, then I will argue more forcefully against you, because now you're not just like a college kid searching for this. Has Education America improved or gotten worse since the Department of Education was formed?
It has literally been 3 months. I have absolutely no idea.
Since the Department of Education was formed in the 70s. We now have 50 years of evidence. Has American education gotten better since we've had a Department of Education, or has it gotten worse?
I personally don't think that that has to do with the Department of Education.
Well, when you've spent over $4.5 trillion with one federal department, and we have 30 schools in Chicago where a fifth grader cannot read at grade level. We have 35 schools in Baltimore where kids cannot do math or reading at grade level. We cannot find a single school, not a single school in downtown Detroit, where by the time they graduate high school in the heavily black areas, that they're proficient in reading or math. We are now like 30.
On fire for the preservation of our nation. The Charlie Kirk Show.
Welcome back. This is Vice President of these United States, J.D. Vance, your host for today's Charlie Kirk Show. Joining me now, and I'm excited about this one, are a few guys who, like me, were lucky enough to call Charlie their friend. I have Taylor Budowich, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. Kaylin Dorr, in the middle, is the White House Deputy Communications Director. And Andrew Colvett is Charlie's longtime friend and the executive producer of this show. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks for being a dear friend to Charlie. And I thought what I'd start with is, we all knew Charlie the man, not just Charlie the personality or Charlie the celebrity or Charlie the guy who did debates on college campuses. I want to start with you, Taylor. What's something that you wish people knew about Charlie that they don't if they just watch his clips on X or YouTube or wherever?
With Charlie, what you see is what you get, and I think that was true even from my first interactions with him on the 2020 presidential campaign. We'd always be doing these fundraisers. Don Jr., Kimberly Guilfoyle, who was the Trump Victory Finance Chair, would host these big fundraising events. Charlie was always the first one to show up, and we would do these team events where we'd make calls all day. And you'd always want Charlie on your team because the guy would get there first, make as many calls, and he was the best fundraiser that we had. But, we have not just the privilege of being Charlie's friend, but seeing what he's built through Turning Point. And it became personal to me when my sister, who we're from California, and, is trying to find her way politically, and said, I want to get involved. And we have the benefit of, we can go to any event, any rally, any intimate setting. And I said, you know what, there's the young women's event that he hosts in Dallas. I said, how about we go to Dallas? And one of the reasons why Charlie's events, I think, have been so successful and why this organization has been so successful is he makes these events approachable to the person that hasn't done politics before, hasn't been engaged, but is curious and thinks maybe something is going wrong with the country, maybe that there's a way to get involved that's not the big rallies, that's not, standing in lines for a long time, but just, and for my sister, it was for a conference room of girls listening to Taylor Swift music during breaks and kind of having approachable, but then also talking about life, talking about family, talking about, at this event, just relationships. And starting to build a path for young people that is both approachable but informed and thoughtful. And so for me, it was an ability and an opportunity for me to share with my sister something that I get to experience all the time. And I think it was something that she really appreciated, and I know millions of young people are appreciating. And by the looks of the signups pretty good, and they're going to appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah. We'll talk about that, Andrew. So it sounds like there's been this blowout of interest in Turning Points USA and the mission. One of the things I really hope is that this assassin didn't silence Charlie's movement, and I think that's the best way for us to honor him is to keep it going. You're one of the critical people at TPUSA. Tell us a little bit about Charlie, but also about what you've seen in the wake of Charlie's assassination.
To put things in perspective, there are, I guess, currently 900 official chapters of Turning Point on college campuses, and that's, when you get at about 900, 920, give or take, kids graduate, you got to kind of rebuild a few chapters. That's about what you're going to get to. And we have 1,200 high school chapters, which was our big new initiative. And we were really proud when the high school chapters eclipsed the college chapters, because we were known as the college. And so there's about 23,000 high schools in America, 24,000. And I'll never forget this. This is a really funny moment a couple weeks ago in Aspen. And Charlie was like, we are going to have a Club America, which is the high school brand, on all 23,000. He didn't know the number. This is actually part of the story. We're going to have it on every high school campus in America. And the team is going, oh my gosh. And Charlie goes, we're going to have 35,000 high school chapters. And, he just threw out this big, stretch goal, and we're like, oh, Charlie, and the whole team's freaking out because that's a huge lift. And he goes, they have to be on every single high school campus. And then I'm sitting next to him, I look at it, and I Google it, and it was like, there's 23,000 high schools in America, Charlie. He goes, oh, okay, 23,000, we're going to be on every single one. And then the team got him eventually to say, well, okay, the big stretch goal is 10,000. And it was amazing because now I tweeted out, and it's I don't know, it's like 10 million views or something. I think it made people feel good because we now have 37,000 applications to start chapters around the country. And, it almost brings a tear to your eye because that moment is like, we all remember, the whole team, we were all in a ballroom going through a presentation together, and he was adamant, we are going to be on every high school in America. And he's going to be proven right.
That's right. Well, he was, in a lot of ways, as you guys know, the ultimate cheerleader. And he saw in you things that you didn't necessarily see in yourself. He was a true friend in that way. And I remember, one particularly difficult moment, probably the hardest moment on the campaign trail for me. We had an event in Arizona, I believe with a bunch of faith leaders. And it was the one time on the entire national campaign where I gave my chief of staff a hug and apologized to him because I was just I hadn't seen the kids in 7 days. I was particularly cranky. And I get to this event, and I'm just kind of like, man, come on, we got to do this again. And Charlie comes back and he gives me a hug. And he's like, your kids, they love you. And they're going to realize eventually why this was so important to do this. And that kind of gave me this sense of, all right, my head's back in the game. And that was what Charlie was always good at, setting ridiculous objectives, but finding some way to motivate people to go after it, even though it was, it seemed unattainable until you got a little Charlie Kirk pep talk. Karoline, what was your, what's the thing you miss the most about Charlie? What do you think is the most difficult part of replacing the great Charlie Kirk?
Well, I think, you mentioned him being everyone's best cheerleader, and the last time I saw him, I have a lot of peace in my heart because I had a very good interaction with him, as we always do. I was wandering the hallways of the EOB, and I must have had a horrible look on my face. And he literally, he jumped down the stairs, he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, what's going on? I just mentioned, man, my baby's 6 months old. We are going through it. We are really, I'm struggling, man. And he sat there and he prayed for me in the halls of the EOB for quite a bit of time, and he didn't need to do that, right? It could have been a quick check-in. And I asked him, I said, dude, how do you do it? How are you doing it? You're killing it. You're a great dad. You guys are doing an amazing job at Turning Point. I think you're doing everything you can. And he looks at me and says, I have a great team. And I laughed and I said, cool. So are you going to donate to the Kaylin Door Nanny Fund after this? And he said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I have a great team. I said, you and J.D. and everyone here in this building are part of the team. And I know that he would be very excited to see all the work that we have going on here in the administration, but also all the testimonials. I mean, I don't know how the guy had the bandwidth. The sheer volume of people whose lives he touched that we're just now discovering is out of control. And I think, growing up, we didn't have a Turning Point. We didn't have a Charlie. We didn't have these kind of people in our lives who dedicated and put in the blood, sweat, and tears to go make sure that this was a thing that existed for people like us. And the lasting message is that, and I think I've said this at Turning Point events before, is that the left wins, the enemy, they win when you feel alone, and when you feel like you're the only one who thinks, eats, prays, breathes, lives the way that you do. And Charlie was so great at connecting those dots and connecting human beings. I mean, our friendships are all stronger because of him with one another, but people, I've never met Andrew, but I know I've talked to him through Charlie for years.
Yep.
And he was so great at doing that. And so I think it's our mission to go out there and embolden young conservatives, young Christians, most importantly, to go out there and continue to do his work, because it's exactly.
And that's when they tried to cut him down at his strongest, doing the most important thing that he was doing for our country. I mean, Taylor, you mentioned his sister, or your sister, going to a Turning Points event. And the thing about Charlie, and this is, again, something I don't know that people fully appreciate unless you know him particularly well, is he was such a bright guy, right? He read theology, and he read political philosophy, and he knew all these like crazy citations, and he knew like every Bible verse for every particular case, or he knew something that was written by some 15th century political philosopher. You're like, Charlie, where the hell did you get that from? It's like, oh, I just read a lot of books. But he could also deal with people at the level who didn't know anything about politics, who were curious, who loved their country, they wanted to make it better. Taylor, talk a little bit about that, because Taylor, those of you who don't know, is the lead in our communication shop here in the White House. He knows more about talking to people than pretty much anybody in the White House, or at least that's what you're supposed to know more than anybody else about. But like, talk about Charlie the communicator, because that's one of the things that made him who he was.
That I'm going to tie two things that they said together, because Kaylin's right. We didn't have a Charlie Kirk. Growing up, we had Barry Goldwater and Reagan, two guys that we barely were alive to know or overlap with. The future has Charlie Kirk. And, you know, before Wednesday, Charlie Kirk was a young man inspiring young people. After he was killed, he has become a titan whose inspiration will move through eternity, inspiring millions of people for decades to come. And he does it through both the understanding of biblical terms. I mean, I spent, I'm sure like a lot of people this weekend, spent my weekend scrolling through old videos of Charlie, and one really hit me, the story of Jesus meeting the prostitute, where he says, you know, those without sin cast the first stone. And Charlie points out, everyone forgets what he says next. And he says to the prostitute, go on, sin no more. And Charlie understood both the compassion of the Bible, but the honesty and truth-telling of the Bible. That is what I think has been missing in our political discourse, that you don't have to be nasty, you can be compassionate, but you should tell the truth. And so the future of the political movement is going to be informed by young people brave and courageous enough to tell the truth, but compassionate enough to understand the suffering of those around them. And that's Charlie Kirk.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing all those stories, for sharing your time, for talking about Charlie. After the break, I'll be joined by Karoline Leavitt, our incredible White House press secretary. This is the Charlie Kirk Show.
Let's come to the front of the line. Yes.
So I have a couple points that I want to talk about in illegal immigration. Is it okay if I say all of them with no interruptions? Okay, cool. So first, illegal immigrants power our economy. They're 50% of U.S. farm workers, harvesting the food on our tables, and fill 70% of construction jobs in states like Texas. They pay $13 billion annually in taxes, including $2 billion to Social Security that they can't claim. Deporting them would slash agricultural output by $60 billion and raise food prices by 6%. Why gut our farms and wallets when these workers fuel our prosperity? That's my first point. Second point. They strengthen our communities with lower crime rates. So in Texas, undocumented immigrants have a 26% lower homicide conviction rates. So, which is 2.2 per 100,000 versus 3 for native-born citizens. Nationally, immigrants are incarcerated at half the rate of native-born, where it's 0.85% versus 1.71%. That's according to Bureau of Justice Statistics from 2019. So if safety is your goal, why deport people who make our streets safer? This is my third point. Mass deportation tears apart American families. Over 4.4 million U.S. citizens, children have an undocumented parent, and in Texas, 1 in 7 kids lives in a mixed status household. Okay, this is my 4th point. Deportation is a fiscal nightmare. Removing 11 million people would cost $315 to $400 billion, more than the entire Homeland Security budget, and shrink our GDP by 1.7 trillion over 10 years. And this is my last point. Our immigration system is broken, pushing people to cross illegally. Visa waits Mexicans can exceed 20 years, and the asylum blockage is 1.3 million cases, with hearings 4 to 6 years out. Okay.
You done?
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
All right, so without looking at the phone, look at me. What
Sure.
should the penalty be for breaking into America?
I think there should be a system where it's more merit-based. So if this person
No, penalty. So what is the penalty? So what should happen
it's a
to you?
felony. It's not a felony, it's a misdemeanor.
No, it is. That's not true. It's 8
It-
U.S.C.
it's a
1312. You can
misdemeanor.
look it up right now.
It's a felony if it's done twice. If you try to cross the border, that is correct.
That is not correct.
I Googled it, dude.
To illegally go across the southern border with the well intent to come into harbor yourself into the interior of the United States, the violation of 8 U.S.C. 1312,
Okay.
which is a felony in the federal criminal code. Now, it can be enforced as a misdemeanor, or it can be upwards to 5 years in prison.
Okay.
Now, I want to know, since it's a felony, law in the
Sure.
books, 8 U.S.C. 1312,
Yeah.
what should the penalty be?
Well, in my opinion, these kinds of laws are usually they're what do you call it? They're sorry. Usually the sorry. Wait, sorry. Can I check my phone real quick? I apologize. Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
What should the penalty be
Okay.
for someone that breaks or comes into America illegally? What should the penalty be?
I think there should be a merit system where the people. Okay,
That's
the
not
penalty.
answer.
All right, let's.
That's
the penalty.
not the answer. It's a very simple moral
Okay.
and legal question.
Okay,
What
sure.
should the penalty be if you come into America illegally?
Okay, so since it's a misdemeanor, not a felony, misdemeanors
I
are.
just told you it's
true,
not 8.
dude.
You can look up on
That's
your
not
chat
true.
GPT. What is
Yeah,
8
yeah.
USC? Look up. What is 8 USC 1312?
No, I know. I've already looked it up.
Yes, which
It
is
takes, when it's your second time crossing the border illegally, then it becomes a felony.
it can be.
Hello, everyone. Vice President J.D. Vance here. Welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show. So I am moonlighting as a radio host today, of course, in honor of my dear friend Charlie. And, I wanted to be like Marco Rubio. I wanted to add an extra job here as the radio host and vice president here in the West Wing, here in the White House complex. But I have another person here who wears many hats and is one of the most gifted communicators I've ever seen, right up there with the great Charlie Kirk. I'm glad to be joined by Karoline Leavitt, our press secretary. Karoline, so good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Very kind. I appreciate your saying that.
So why don't you kick it off and tell us a little bit. So those who don't know, who are listening or watching, you actually were involved with TPUSA very early on when you were in college. Tell me about that experience and about getting to know Charlie Kirk through that forum.
Well, I'm a Gen Z conservative, so I was really raised within the MAGA movement, and within the MAGA movement as a Gen Z conservative means you're very much a part of the Turning Point USA movement. And so my political education was not just through the rise of President Trump, but also the rise of Charlie Kirk.
Yep.
And watching him and listening to him, and I inquired about starting a Turning Point USA chapter on my college, St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire, where I went and where my political ambition and love of media and politics really began. And so just by watching Charlie from a distance was so inspiring to me as a young conservative woman. And then I got to know him personally when I decided to run for Congress, and he was a tremendous supporter and friend.
Great. So you literally communicate for a living. You're the person that speaks to the American people and the world on behalf of the White House every single day. Did you learn anything particular about the way that Charlie Kirk communicated with people? And what I always appreciated is that though he was very smart, and though you see all these clips of him owning people or of him getting the better of somebody in a debate, if you watched a full Charlie Kirk rally and all of the Q&A, and I was just talking with Andrew about this off camera, 90% of it is Charlie being kind and being compassionate and offering moral support to people. What do you take from Charlie Kirk, the communicator?
So many things, just by watching him and by being around him. But I think most of all, standing firm in your convictions and picking a fight, especially when you know you have the facts and the truth on your side, but doing it with a smile. And that's something Charlie did so brilliantly and well. He would go to these campus reform events and he would say to the crowd, if you disagree with me, come to the front of the line. And I find myself doing that in the briefing rooms, you know, picking on the reporters whom I know very much disagree with me and with the president. But as long as you believe in what you're saying and you have conviction in it and you have truth and the facts on your side, it makes it a lot easier to say it. And that's what Charlie did for a living. And I know he inspired me as a young voice for President Trump now, like you said, behind the White House podium. And, you know, before every briefing, I always pray to Jesus Christ. And Charlie was so outspoken with his faith, and I will continue to be in honor of him. But I'll also think of Charlie and just how brilliantly he was able to combat the lies with facts and to do it with a smile.
Absolutely. So, you know, I always think of Charlie Kirk debating sometimes these kids on college campuses and how the one part of your job that maybe would be harder if you went on college campuses is I think some of these college kids ask way better questions than the radicals do in the White House press briefing room. So that'd be like good preparation for you in a lot of ways. Yeah, exactly. TPOSA was actually the varsity. Right. Now you're kind of the JV level with your opponents here, but you do such an incredible job. And you were, of course, not just the White House press secretary. You were also the main spokesperson during the Trump campaign. And you know, I want to ask how important Charlie was to the victory, because there were so many events that we did with TPUSA where I would show up and they were incredible and the energy was off the charts. And Charlie would always tell me, whenever I went to Arizona, he'd say, don't worry about Arizona, worry about Michigan, worry about Wisconsin, we've got Arizona. Talk with a minute and 10 seconds remaining just about how important Charlie was to our effort to win and make Donald Trump into President of the United States.
Look, the president has said it himself. The president's massive gains with young Americans across the country was in no small part because of the efforts of Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. And our team on the campaign was constantly checking in with him and keeping him apprised of what the president was doing and saying, because we needed his voice to relay that to his audience, which is made up of young people across the country. And the president spoke at many Turning Point events. He went into that lion's den at the invitation of Charlie to get his message across. And Charlie was incredibly supportive of the non-traditional new media strategy that the president took. And, you know, the president loved Charlie deeply. You know that, Mr. Vice President, and I know that. And I know he deeply is hurt by this loss, because Charlie played an instrumental role in returning the president to the Oval Office. And I just love that clip from election night when Charlie realized President Trump had won. And he was speechless for one of the few times in his life. There were no words, just tears.
Thank you, Karoline. Up next, the great Tucker Carlson joins me. We'll be right back.
Are unnecessary administrators and paper pushers. And why is that important? Because we've not been funding teachers or education the last 30 years. We've been funding unnecessarily bureaucracy in our education the last 30 or 40 years. And President Trump goes to abolish it. Thank you for your time. I got to get to the next question. Thank you. Hello.
Hi. My name's Ellie. Overall, just to go into my question, I am conservative. So going into this, I was like, oh, like what should I ask you about? I think overall, I was going through different policies, and in general, I agree. Ultimately, I think the topic of my question is how to approach politics in school and in general with this function. I've found that a lot of times when I talk to people who are on the other side of me, they are surprised to find out what I think, and my ideas are not that crazy. It's like when you actually get into the meat of it, it's like, oh, actually, maybe it does make sense. And so I think it's really valuable to start giving these ideas to the world. And so this is one of these options. But I guess my question is this the best way? Because when I hear, like, for example, on Reddit, they're like, don't approach him, don't do this, he's just doing that, he's doing this, he's doing that, he's using all these tactics. And so I wonder if you've considered, not to say that this is a bad way to go about it, but if there's maybe a slightly better way, because I think what you're saying has a lot of value in this world, but it's like in this school specifically, it is thought of as evil and as like not like a valid way to think.
That's a UC San Diego problem, not a Charlie Kirk problem,
no,
right?
and it's not, and it's not to say it's a problem of you. No.
And I mean, like, and I read there was some op-ed journalist where they said, ignore Charlie, ignore him. Well, what they're saying is that they are not either smart enough or they're not intellectually mature enough to have a discussion with a conservative on any issue. I have literally almost no notes. I have like a couple charts to show you if the topics come up. You guys can use AI, you guys can use Grok, you could do whatever you want. You could bring a professor, you could bring 5 of your top libs together, debate me, right?
Yeah.
Other side? Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. And you guys can debate me at any time. I fail to understand why, well, actually I know the reason. Speech is not a left-wing value. And they do not believe in freedom of speech, they believe in totalitarian control. There are exceptions to that. So if they have a problem, I think this is one of the best ways, not the best way. I literally could not be more open to disagreement. I say if you disagree, you go to the front of the line.
Yeah.
And I mean, how often do you as conservatives get a chance to challenge liberals on campus, right? And being welcomed, ever?
Oh, absolutely, almost never. Definitely
because
not in
speech
class.
is not a left-wing value.
No, but to say that, I mean, with all of that being said, that is very true. But ultimately, what happens here is I see a lot of, like, the ideas just being like bubbled against. And so like when I talk to my friends, their ideas aren't changed from these conversations. And so I wonder if there's just like a...
You would be surprised. I'm sorry to interrupt. What happens here gets seen hundreds of millions of times on social media.
Absolutely, yes.
The crowds are growing. And so look, some people are going to remain closed-minded. They're not going to, have their horizons open, but that's on them, right? They have to actually want to pursue the truth and not just have their own worldview confirmed.
And then I guess that's where I disagree, because I think fundamentally...
Kids and...
No, and I couldn't agree more with that, like, stance. I guess maybe stepping away from Reddit, it's, to me, the people on this campus, this is a school I go to, and almost everyone I'm surrounded with has a completely different view from me, and I
Not everybody.
No, and this is like, but this, like, the people here, to find them, it feels like you're, like, sifting through a needle in a haystack.
You want a hat?
Sure.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Disagreements, come to the front of the line. Yes.
So I have a couple points that I want to talk about in illegal immigration. Is it okay if I say all of them with no interruptions? Okay, cool. So first, illegal immigrants power our economy. They're 50% of U.S. farm workers, harvesting the food on our tables, and fill 70% of construction jobs in states like Texas. They pay $13 billion annually in taxes, including $2 billion to Social Security that they can't claim. Deporting them would slash agricultural output by $60 billion and raise food prices by 6%. Why gut our farms and wallets when these workers fuel our prosperity? That's my first point. Second point, they strengthen our communities with lower crime rates. So in Texas, undocumented immigrants have a 26 lower percent homicide conviction rates. So, which is 2.2 per 100,000 versus 3 for native-born citizens. Nationally, immigrants are incarcerated at half the rate of native-born, where it's 0.85% versus 1.71%. That's according to Bureau of Justice Statistics from 2019. So if safety is your goal, why deport people who make our streets safer? This is my third point. Mass deportation tears apart American families. Over 4.4 million U.S. citizens, children have an undocumented parent. And in Texas, 1 in 7 kids lives in a mixed status household. Okay, this is my fourth point. Deportation is a fiscal nightmare. Removing 11 million people would cost $315 to $400 billion. more than the entire Homeland Security budget, and shrink our GDP by 1.7 trillion over 10 years. And this is my last point. Our immigration system is broken, pushing people to cross illegally. Visa waits Mexicans can exceed 20 years, and the asylum blockage is 1.3 million cases, with hearings 4 to 6 years out. Okay.
You done?
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
All right, so without looking at the phone, look at me. What
Sure.
should the penalty be for breaking into America?
I think there should be a system where it's more merit-based. So if this person
No, penalty. So what is the penalty? So what should happen to you?
It's not a felony, it's a
No,
misdemeanor.
it is. That's not true. It's 8 U.S.C. 1312. You can look it up right now.
It's a felony if it's done twice. If you try to cross the border, that is correct.
That is not correct.
I Googled it, dude.
To illegally go across the southern border with the well intent to come into harbor yourself into the interior of the United States, it's a violation of 8 U.S.C. 1312, which is a felony in the federal criminal code. Now, it can be enforced as a misdemeanor, or it can be upwards to 5 years in prison. Now, I want to know, since it's a felony, law in the books, 8 U.S.C. 1312, what should the penalty be?
Well, in my opinion, these kinds of laws are usually they're what do you call it? They're sorry. Usually the sorry. Wait, sorry. Can I check my phone real quick? I apologize. Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
What should the penalty be for someone that breaks or comes into America illegally? What should the penalty be?
I think there should be a merit system where the people. Okay, the penalty.
Answer.
All right,
That's not the answer. It's a very simple moral and legal question.
Okay,
what
sure.
should the penalty be if you come into America illegally?
Okay, so since it's a misdemeanor, not a felony, misdemeanors
I
are.
just told you it's not 8. You can look up on your chat
true.
GPT what is 8 USC. Look up what is 8 USC 1312.
No, I know. I've already looked it up.
Yes,
when it's your second time crossing the border illegally, then it becomes a felony.
It can be.
Welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show. Joining me now is my friend and a close friend of Charlie, the great Tucker Carlson. Tucker, thank you so much for being here. And we have 10 minutes, Tucker. And just to give you guys at home a little behind the scenes, the producer just showed Tucker a sign that said rap. And Tucker looked at it and said, this is expand on your point, right? So if we end up going 35 minutes, you'll know it's not the host's fault. It's Tucker Carlson's fault.
We read what we want to read.
But I had it, Tucker, I think you know this, and some of you know this because I wrote about it on X.com. But when X.com was Twitter, I did an interview with the Tucker Carlson Tonight Show on Fox News. And I got a message from a guy named Charlie Kirk that said, you did a great job, I really liked what you said, and let's keep in touch. And that began the start of my friendship with Charlie Kirk. That was the first time I had ever communicated with Charlie Kirk. So you've known him for a long time. You talked to him about a lot of issues, and I want to talk in part about how to honor Charlie's legacy, because I think that he modeled civil discourse within the right. He accepted there were big disagreements on all these issues, but he thought we were all on the same team and we could debate this stuff, but actually have a drink at the end of the day and recognize that we were all trying to accomplish fundamentally the good of the country. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Before I get there, just tell me about your buddy, Charlie Kirk. What was he like? What did people who only know him from radio or TV not appreciate about what a good guy he was?
That his Christianity was sincere, and his commitment to Jesus was totally sincere. And it, sometimes isn't, especially in public figures who throw out Bible verses they don't understand and stuff like that. But in his case, not speaking to him in particular, but in his case, it informed every single part of his life, from his marriage to the way he treated his children, to the way he treated his staff, to the way he approached disagreement, to the way he thought of other people, which was always primarily as people first. And that was, he was much younger than I am, and I met him when he was a teenager, so he's literally the age of one of my children. So it was kind of hard to take him seriously at first. And over the years that I knew him, more than 10 years, I ended up learning from him. I'm not just saying this because he's passed. I mean that sincerely. And the main thing that I learned from him was how to disagree with people on topics that you take very seriously and that they take very seriously without hating them or without feeling bitterness. I mean, it wasn't, if people knew what was going on behind the scenes, there was a lot going on behind the scenes, and it was intense, and it was bitter, and, because the divide, particularly in foreign policy questions, is very real in the Republican Party. The neocons versus the realists, or however you want to describe it, he was on the realist side for sure, but he was mad at the people who disagreed with him. He liked them as people. He agreed with them on some things. And he would always say that. I agree. In private, he would say that. And, I was involved in it because people were mad at him for having me at his conferences or for talking to me. And so we had cause to talk about it a lot up until he was assassinated. And I was so struck the whole time. I would say, I would use the ugly language I'm famous for in private, and he would never talk like that. He would say, well, I agree with him on this, but obviously I'm on your side on that. And he just never forgot there was a person behind the views, and that inspired me. And God commands that of us. That's a real commandment, in my opinion, and he lived it.
That's exactly right, Tucker. He treated everybody with respect, and because he genuinely loved people, and he genuinely wanted their salvation, he wanted them to have a relationship with God, he wanted them to know the truth, he always treated them with respect, maybe especially when he disagreed with them. And I think about this. So you talked about foreign policy. That is one of the big divides on the American right now. And the thing that Charlie seemed to understand intuitively is that the coalition that made Donald Trump the President of the United States and J.D. Vance the Vice President of the United States, it included Tucker Carlson, but also Ben Shapiro. It included people who did disagree vociferously, but agreed on 70 or 80% of issues. And fundamentally, the question Charlie would ask is, if you're a good faith person and you're trying to do right, then you are part of the Big Ten. And I think that's something that we have to try to model together, because Charlie's no longer around to do it for us. And one way in particular, I was very touched by this. I actually texted Mark about this because you very generously have put out some donation link to help support Charlie's family. And think about it. Erica and the kids, most importantly, they're grieving the loss of a dear husband and father, but we're going to have to step in and fill the gap to provide for them in a way that Charlie no longer can't because he was taken down by an assassin's bullet. Who I saw share that link was Mark Levin.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a really good example of how Charlie was able to bring people together from across our movement so long as we were operating in good faith. That was the question. If you were good faith, you're on his team.
That is exactly right. And good faith is the measure. And I have to say, I think now is exactly the wrong time to appropriate the memory of someone and the emotion that comes with that, the really intense emotion that all of us feel at his murder, and use it for your own parochial ends. Like, he stood for this, and I think the reason that Charlie was able to bridge the gap, particularly in foreign policy, is because he had, for example, genuine affection for Israel, which he expressed to me in private many, many times. Like, I love Israel. I don't think we should have another forever war, regime change war against Iran. And I think that made complete sense to me. I sort of agree with that, actually. And so it allowed both sides to talk to him because they felt like, this person doesn't hate me. It doesn't need to get existential. It's not about disliking me or some weird bigotry. But I don't think it's helpful for people to jump in, particularly foreign heads of state, to say, this is what, he lived for my cause or whatever. That's disgusting, actually. Don't do that. That turns everybody off. You don't help your own cause by doing that, and it's also literally untrue. So I just hope that we can continue in, I'm not exaggerating, the spirit that he operated in, which is one of love for other people, including people we disagree with, and don't make it, as small bore as that. That doesn't help.
Yeah, so one of the issues, Tucker, and I agree with you, that he would express disagreements with the administration on. There are two that jump out. Is one, Charlie was a hardliner on immigration. He wanted us to control our borders as much as possible. Yes. He wanted us to ramp up the deportations. I remember having conversations with Charlie where he would say, why aren't the deportations higher? Why aren't you doing more? And I would talk to him. But it wasn't, hey, I don't understand this or I disagree with you and therefore I'm going to blast you and assume that you're in bad faith. It's, I'm a free citizen. I love you guys. I supported you guys, and I'm going to use my platform to try to accomplish as much good as I possibly can. And I think that made him such an effective operator. And I would talk to Charlie. I'd say, Charlie, well, look, here are the reasons why. And as you've seen, Tucker, we've ramped up deportation numbers. We have actually, there are a lot of people who are self-deporting because they don't want to be in the country knowing that eventually immigration enforcement will happen. But I think part of that success comes from people like Charlie applying pressure. Pressure as a friend, pressure as somebody who cares deeply about the issue. And that's true also, I know we have about 90 seconds left, but that's true about foreign policy. Like, I remember Charlie calling me and saying, I'm really worried. And this is back in the summer when the Iran strikes were sort of first being contemplated. He said, I'm really worried this is going to become another regime change war in the Middle East that we get trapped in. And I said, Charlie, first of all, like, have some faith here. The President of the United States is not a believer in perpetual war. He knows the mistakes of Iraq and Afghanistan. He doesn't want to repeat them. But Charlie was very clear that he could support Israel. And by the way, he did eventually support the strikes on the nuclear facility while simultaneously saying, no more. This can't become a bigger thing. This can't become a broader thing. And again, I think he modeled a really good way of applying pressure, of disagreeing when you do disagree, but also recognizing that so long as you're operating in good faith, we're all part of the team. And that's something I'm going to try to take from Charlie's legacy, is not that we're always right, not that we can't take criticism, but that we all should try to work together.
It did worry me, because I think your description is perfect. He was one of the very few who took that message and stood by it. I mean, right to the very end. This cannot get bigger. We don't want another regime change war. But man, some of the people who send money to Turning Point, his donors, were very tough on him. So tough on him that I could feel it. You know, I talked to him a lot in the last few months, and he was under enormous pressure. He never bent. He never became bitter.
He kept his integrity to the very end.
To the very end. And I just think it's important to say that because it's true.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tucker. It's good to be with you. Don't go away. We'll be right back with our great Secretary of Health and Human Services, Bobby Kennedy Jr. You are listening to The Charlie Kirk Show.
They come. It's the largest slavery operation in American history that many illegal aliens helped make possible on the southern border. And I guess the final question I'll have is, should a government serve its citizens first and foremost?
Yeah, of course. Well, okay, there's been many people who are like very political leaders who have said that this place is built off of immigrants.
Oh, is it? Wait, hold on. Let's think about that.
Sure.
First of all, it's legal, not illegal. But was America founded by immigrants or settlers?
Settlers.
That's not an immigrant.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's not my point. My point is that people
brought up the nation built by immigrants.
Yeah,
we're actually not.
Because the political leaders have said that this place is built.
Yeah, and they're
from
wrong.
They're wrong. Political leaders are wrong. George W. Bush is wrong. All these political leaders who have built America.
By the way, the first person to say that was.
How is that wrong? When illegal immigrants make. They grow the economy.
Okay,
statistically,
allow me to build it out for you.
Sure.
Immigrants have helped at times in American history, but we are first and foremost a nation founded by settlers. Immigrants come to a country already built. Settlers come to a barren place and build something new.
Right.
This land was barren when people came. In the 1840s gold rush, this was not an easy place to live.
Yeah.
California was not exactly industrialized. There was not immigrants coming west to California. Those were settlers building a new place around, Western values. Finally, I would just ask the question, do you see a moral distinction between a legal immigrant and an illegal immigrant?
Well, the argument is that they're cutting in line. Like, their argument is that they're cutting in line in the 20-year process that it would take for someone to cross illegally.
It's not 20, but yeah.
At most, it's 20. At most, it's 20. Right now, there's around like 1.2 million people who are currently waiting that would take 6 to 7 years for a hearing.
And by the way, no one has a right to come to this country,
to be
clear.
Let me stay on track of what I was going to say. Okay, so people who come here, usually, almost all the time when they come here, they benefit society. There's studies that have done this.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but overall in general.
But no,
when you look overall
I
in general,
fundamentally disagree with that.
You can't disagree with a fact.
Hold on. Do you think Ilhan Omar has enriched the United States of America?
I don't know who.
Do you think Rashida Tlaib?
Uh-huh.
I mean, I could go through person by person by person.
Sorry, I don't know these people. Are these people who have are illegal immigrants that have caused harm?
Yeah, again, if you don't know, I don't mean to pick on you. It's fine.
Okay.
But I guess the final question is,
sure.
Do you have any concern that there are too many people coming into this country and we're a nation of strangers, not a nation of neighbors?
If the people who are coming are creating America, making it more growing, like the economy is growing, then what harm is that doing? Especially if the people who are coming
are
are not...
an economy, though, aren't we? We're a culture. We're a language.
Yeah,
we're
of course.
People.
Okay, so let's talk about that front. When they come here, they don't have any kind of... They're not committing as more crimes than the people who are already here.
Again,
that is a statistic
we've already
done.
dispelled that, but
that is not. You can't
in
dispel
California,
a statistic.
Let's
What are
take
you talking
California.
about? You can't.
Do you think there's anything wrong that a majority of young people in California speak Spanish, not English?
Wait, sorry. Can you say that?
Do you think there's anything wrong or troubling to the fact that a majority of people under the age of 30 here in this state speak Spanish, not English? Is there a problem with that?
Well, yeah. Everyone should be able to have a ability to communicate with the rest of the crowd. So I don't know what the big issue of that is.
See, I think it's a huge problem when we have a nation where you can't communicate with your fellow neighbors.
Simple solution. Teach them how to speak English. What is your point?
Yeah, and our schools don't do that, actually. And also, have a better solution. Yeah. Don't import a bunch of people that don't speak English.
You mean importing people who actually grow the economy?
Well,
who don't...
I reject your premise.
That's not a premise. That's a study that's been done.
Do you know what a premise is? I don't actually care as much about economic growth because we're one nation under GDP. We're not one nation under GDP. We're a nation under God. Yeah. And when we lose social cohesion, and you import a bunch of people that don't share our values, that don't necessarily always assimilate, that's a major and serious problem. And we are a people first and foremost with a creed, and that creed is falling apart. Mass migration has not helped that creed. Yes, they might buy more trinkets. They might help depress wages. Mass migration, of course, can help.
All good things, all great things for America.
They help major corporations, but you know what they also do? They keep down the wages of working people. If you are a plumber, yes, of course. If you think about it, if you're a plumber, electrician, or a welder, and you have to compete against someone from Nicaragua who's willing to do it for $5 less an hour, that depresses the wages of the American citizen.
Right. Yeah. So there's been studies that have done that also counteract that. Illegal immigrants.
Well, let's use our reason.
Let's use our reason. Look at our studies.
Let's use our reason.
How about statistics?
How about our reason? So we've had mass migration for 20 years. Have wages gone up?
I don't know.
No, they haven't actually. So forget your studies. For 10 years we've had 30 million people come into America. Wages have gone down dramatically. Yeah. Maybe there's a reason why.
Okay.
So what I
Welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show. Joining us now is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., our great Health and Human Services Secretary. Bobby, thank you so much for being here. And one of the things that I always took from Charlie was this idea that we needed to grow the coalition and expand the coalition. There's probably no person in the entire administration who better exemplifies that than you, one of the leading consumer advocates, health advocates that has existed in our country, but until a few years ago, more aligned. Given your name, you were a scion of one of the great political families on the Democratic side in American history, but now you're one of the most important members of the administration in a Republican administration. Maybe talk, if you would, just a little bit about Charlie's approach to politics and how it ultimately made you one of the most important people in the federal government.
Yeah, well, Charlie was probably the primary architect of my unification with President Trump. I actually announced my endorsement of President Trump at a Turning Point rally in Arizona, which was his idea. And he was, for people who were there, remember it, there was all these kind of fireworks and sparklers on the stage when we shook hands, and that was all Charlie's orchestration. That was his idea, and he insisted on that. But I first met Charlie in July of 2021. I had just written a book about Anthony Fauci. And he had me on his show for this very, very wide-ranging interview in which he really let me talk a lot, which was unusual at that time because I was not allowed to talk on most outlets.
Sure.
And I think both of us approach each other with some trepidation because we came from such different places. By the end of that interview, I felt like I'd met a spiritual soulmate, and our friendship blossomed after that. And even during the campaign, when he was strongly supporting President Trump, we always had a communication and outreach. And then after I made the endorsement, I saw him all the time, and he helped me a lot during the transition.
Yep.
As did you, as did Tucker. And helped a lot. Amaryllis, who's my daughter-in-law, he really kind of pushed her a lot to get the job that she has today. So, but the thing that united us was his total commitment to free speech. And now it had been a theme of my campaign. I had been subject to censorship like so many other people during COVID, and saw the threat that it was to our country, so that once they understood, they could censor us. And Charlie and I talked about this, that the founders put the freedom of speech in the First Amendment because they knew all the other rights depended on it. If a government can silence its opponents, it has a license for any kind of atrocity. And, as soon as they realized that we were going to put up with that, they went after freedom of assembly, which is in the First Amendment, with social distancing regulations. They went after freedom of religion, closing all the churches in this country, which is extraordinary. It's extraordinary that we let get away with that. And by the way, they kept the liquor stores open as essential businesses. They went after the Fifth Amendment. They shut all of our businesses, 3.5 million businesses, with no due process, no just compensation. They went after the Seventh Amendment right to jury trial. The Seventh Amendment says no American shall be denied the right of a trial before a jury of his peers. In case there are controversies exceeding $25, there's no pandemic exception. And yet they were able to give these broad categories of industry, these exemptions from any litigation, no matter how much they hurt you. They went after the Fourth Amendment prohibitions against warrantless searches and seizures by making us disclose our medical information. So the entire Constitution came under attack as soon as they realized that they could go after free speech.
So we have 80 seconds left on radio, and then we'll continue streaming for the folks who are watching live on the internet and other platforms. But to talk to me just a little bit about Charlie's influence and actually politically getting you to be the H&HS secretary, because I remember he was such a strong advocate for you. He was so proud of the president and of you when the president nominated you. Obviously, like all of our big nominees, there was a tough confirmation fight. Just give us 50 seconds on how important he was to making you have the position and the title you have right now.
Well, you know what the transition is like. You never kind of know what's going to happen. And he was a critical ally for me in calling President Trump. And at first, when President Trump asked me whether I wanted this job, I was tentative. I didn't know whether I wanted to handle the Medicaid and Medicare portion, which is the biggest, economic behemoth.
Sure.
And he really persuaded me that I should do it. And then he helped me not only making calls to the president himself, but telling me people that I should call. So operating strategically. But I'll just say one other thing before we sign.
Let me pause there, Bobby. This will continue on streaming. But for those listening on radio, I want to thank the secretary. And again, we'll keep on going for another few minutes off the radio, but appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now that we're, I guess, off radio, keep talking about this piece of it, because
I think
he was strategically brilliant, and he was a good political operator in a way that I think so many people don't realize.
Yeah, he was. He was an impresario strategist, and he knew exactly. He did the same thing with Amaryllis. He told her, make this phone call, make this phone call, make this one first, this one second.
Yep.
And he knew exactly, he understood the uses of power, and he understood what buttons needed to be pushed to move the ball across the goal line. So he was very good on that, so he was a pragmatist, but he was also one of the most idealistic people that I've ever met.
He was.
And his principal preoccupation was with conversation. He thought conversation was the only thing that could heal our country. We have all these forces, and particularly the algorithms now in social media, that are driving us apart. And it's inexorable. There seems to be nothing that could stop it. And he understood that the only thing that could bridge that gap was debate, was open debate, and that censorship was the enemy of that. And that in order to have real conversations, we had to end the vitriol. We had to stop being poisonous toward each other. We need to say what we mean without saying it mean.
Yes.
And he was just amazingly, he was so respectful of the people who disagreed with him. He gave them the most respect and the greatest hearing. He wanted their voices to be heard. I saw on one of the networks just now that there's this big revolt against social media because of their contribution to the polarization that ultimately led to his death, this brewing up of hatred. Ironically, I think Charlie would revolt against that.
Yes.
Because he hated censorship.
Yes.
What he said is the answer is conversation and dialogue. And we need to learn to do that if our democracy is going to survive. If we're going to survive, we need to talk to each other, even though all these things are telling us not to.
Yeah, so I talked to Charlie. It was either the night of or the day after our debate with Tim Walz. And, he was excited. He told me how great I did. And obviously, it's awesome to hear from a friend who tells you that you did a great job. But he asked what I thought of Tim. And I said, honestly, because you get in this sort of bunker mentality in the campaign, it's us versus them. And I was like, honestly, even though I'm glad that I think I did well, and I certainly don't want this guy to become vice president, I actually kind of liked him afterwards, after 90 minutes of talking with him. And Charlie said, that's why I do all these debates. It's like you can disagree vehemently with somebody, but if you're actually communicating with them, it's really hard not to appreciate at least a little bit as a human being. Even if you think they're 100% wrong on the issues, you can appreciate them a little bit as a human being, and that's what Charlie was so good at. So with all respect to you and all gratitude for being such a big part of his life the last couple of years, Bobby, good to see you.
You too, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you.
And look actually at self-evident truths, be like, does that make sense? Can you name
statistics are self-evident?
Well,
truths.
not always. Statistics are
Not
very
always?
misleading. Yes, like for example, I could say, did you know that 600 people a year die because of seatbelts? Well, that's a misleading statistic because over 100,000 lives are saved by seatbelts. That's an incomplete statistic.
Wait, okay, so where's the, so that's a gray area. So where's the gray area where people are talking about where 26% of illegal immigrants who come here commit less crimes than native born?
Okay, how many times have we been over this? That's just not correct.
Well,
it's
that
not
is
true.
correct. That is correct.
Every single crime. It doesn't matter about the
This is a study
rate.
that was done in Texas, the most diverse,
Again,
second most diverse state.
Every crime an illegal commits is one that should never have happened.
Okay.
It is a period.
Yeah, of course,
they should not be here. So I don't
agree.
care about the rate. The rate is irrelevant. So let me just ask one final
The rate
question.
is relevant.
Someone broke into the country and cut in line. What should happen to them?
Well, they're given, ideally there's a system. Ideally there's a system that's merit-based where these people then become part of the citizen, like they become a legal citizen.
Yeah, I mean, we have clarity but not agreement. I say deport them all back to their country of origin and put Americans first.
That's not an appropriate solution. Well,
the American people voted for it, and it is appropriate.
It isn't appropriate because most of the people that do come here illegally contribute positively to society. Dude. Statistically, everything backs this.
You're not listening to anything I'm saying, and that's fine. They take jobs from Americans, they depress wages, they steal Social Security numbers, they commit a crime every single day that they're here, they flood our public schools, they flood our social services, they flood our hospitals, they are a burden on the taxpayer. They should go back and make their own country great again and apply and become a legal immigrant if they want to live here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's time for a whole new generation to wise up and rise up. The Charlie Kirk Show.
Welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show. I'm J.D. Vance, and joining us now is a very special guest, the White House Chief of Staff, the person the President of the United States calls the most powerful woman in the world. It always embarrasses her, which is why I have to say it every time I introduce her. Susie Wiles, who is such a vital role of what we do in the White House every single day, such a vital role of the success of the 2024 campaign. Susie, I just want to say thanks so much for joining us here to honor Charlie here. I want to tell you a little story. You may not be aware of this story, and maybe you didn't pay attention to the social media chatter, but if I go back to probably 6 weeks after I had been selected by the president, I was the vice presidential nominee, we were campaigning hard, and there was a weird little social media campaign to try to get Susie Wiles fired from her job, and she was running the Trump campaign at the time.
More than a social media campaign.
It was a full-on campaign, and I remember talking. Charlie Kirk called me, and he said, this thing to take down Susie is an op, meaning it's an operation meant to discredit us, meant to make us less effective. And the reason he thought it was so important to protect you is because he had such great respect for you. He thought you were such an incredible part of the team. You were sort of the person that held all the chaos together operationally in the midst of that very intense campaign. And so Charlie was thinking, as he always did, a little ahead of the curve. He was asking himself, what are the problems that are out there so I can be 2 or 3 steps ahead? And he was fighting for you, maybe even before you realized that there was this thing against you. And it was never a situation where anybody ever doubted Susie Wiles, but I wonder sometimes if the reason why you had such good and strong support from the very beginning is because you had such a powerful voice in the Republican Party standing with you every step of the way. So I just wanted to tell you that because it's one of the reasons why I admire and respect you. I know Charlie loved, admired, and respected you, but I've told my Charlie story. Maybe talk in those days of the campaign what an important part Charlie was of our efforts and our ultimately successful efforts to install the boss in the Oval Office.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, and thank you for doing this.
Of course.
I have a Charlie story that maybe hasn't been told, at least not enough. In the 2024 campaign, the law changed, election law changed, and campaigns were finally allowed to coordinate with outside organizations. One of the biggest expenses in a campaign is canvassing. The door-to-door activity that, particularly in a Donald Trump campaign, is critically important. And so we were liberated. We had license to coordinate with everybody, and everybody came to the table, and everybody was going to canvass at this level with this sort of fidelity to our plan, and included Charlie. And at the end of this whole odyssey, the person that really did everything they said they were going to do and more was Turning Point. He had an army of good people who were motivated and passionate, and they delivered 110%. And I don't know that Charlie gets enough credit for that. That was a tactical assist to the campaign. We didn't have to pay for it. We didn't have to think about it. We didn't have to follow up after him. It was an immeasurable help. And most of those canvassers were some of the same young people that voted for the president and convinced their families.
Yeah.
So in many ways, it was really a pivotal effort.
That's awesome to hear. And it's consistent, Susie, with this theme that I've been coming back to today, which is that Charlie was a brilliant orator and communicator and debater. He would go to these college campuses and give them the courage to speak, to build friendships with fellow conservatives and Republicans. But everybody knows that because everybody saw it. What they didn't see necessarily is that Charlie was this very effective strategic operator at all levels of politics. And, you know, one of the things that the president always talks about is that compared to really not just his campaign in 2016, but any Republican campaign for the past 40 years, we saw young voters shift in every county, in every demographic, white, black, rich or poor. Young voters shifted right in 2024 in this very profound way. Can you talk a little bit about what Charlie did to make that happen and why this youth movement that he really built, I mean, he was a kid when he started Turning Points USA, how this youth movement, without any of us probably being able to prophesize or predict it, ended up helping us deliver the White House in 2024?
Well, I explained the tactical benefit. We never thought again about Arizona or Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Charlie had it. And as for the youth vote, I mean, he evangelized. He was on every college campus in every part of the country. And he was broader than that. A turning point event was something you had to be at, had to pay attention to. I know President Trump felt that way, and I think you did too.
Yep.
And I'm struck by, you had Secretary Kennedy on just a minute ago, and Charlie was instrumental, very, in Secretary Kennedy coming to the ticket, and you too.
Yep, that's right. I know that. And that's one of the things that, I'm sitting in this office here in the West Wing or White House complex, and if it weren't for Charlie Kirk, I would not be the Vice President of the United States. And I think about that a lot. I've thought about that a lot over the last few days. I mean, other than the president himself, Charlie was maybe the most important person in both getting us across the finish line, but actually getting me the nomination to begin with. It was his grassroots army. It was his advocacy that I think made me a credible selection for VP in the first place. And obviously the president makes the final determination, but it takes a team. And Charlie was such an incredibly important part of that team. It's one of the reasons why I feel so indebted to him. And one of the reasons, I worry, Susie, that he is fundamentally just an irreplaceable figure. And he is. There's no way that we can replace Charlie. Certainly not for Erica and the beautiful kids. They're never going to get back what the assassin's gun took away from them. But the movement has to figure out a way of continuing to build on what he built and continuing to go to college campuses and talk to young people. And not just that, but when we won power, Charlie was a critical part of getting us the right people, of staffing. So talk a little bit about that, because other than the President of the United States, the Chief of Staff is probably the most important person in the transition, picking cabinet secretaries, picking all these important staffers. Talk about why Charlie mattered so much, and not just helping us get there, but helping us succeed now that we're here.
I think he worked in transition every day.
He did.
In one place or another, doing one thing or another. And so very much the Trump administration has his imprint. My worry about Turning Point, and I couldn't agree with you more, it has to be bigger and better and growing all the time, is one of Charlie's gifts was not talking at you, but engaging you where you were.
That's right.
And it's hard sometimes. Tough things are coming at you. He never shrunk from that. So whoever, I can't say takes Charlie's place because that will be nobody, but whoever comes in to be sort of a voice of Turning Point, they need to be somebody that's willing to engage at a level where you're not talking to the followers, you're talking to the people that are not, and engaging them where they are. That's going to be the hardest thing, I think, to replace.
I really agree with that, Susie, and I've talked to a lot of the Turning Point staff, and what they tell me is operationally, organizationally, Charlie had built a machine. Some of these people have been working with Charlie since he was literally a teenager, and he trusted them. Where I think he is genuinely irreplaceable is, for lack of a better word, on the talent side of it, right? How do you find a person who goes into these places, who takes very difficult questions, sometimes very hostile questions, and to your point, is actually engaging with them, is not talking at them. Now, there are all these social media clips, and I was talking about this earlier, so forgive the audience, forgive me for repeating myself, but he was not just the super viral clips of him getting the better of a person in a debate. If you sit down and watch a Charlie Kirk event at one of these universities, it is 90% him almost acting like a big brother to these kids, right? If it's a young conservative who's very nervous about the crowd and nervous about asking a question, Charlie steps up and says, don't be nervous. I was nervous at one point. Just speak slowly, get your question out. He would coach them through it. If there was a young progressive who is getting jeered by some of the people in the audience, he'd say, no, guys, let her speak. Let him speak. This is part of open debate, is they get to hear from us and we get to hear from them. And I thought that was just such an incredible thing that he did. I've talked to a number of friends. I've talked to, Tucker. I've talked to Laura Ingraham. I've talked to a number of people about how we can try to replace that part of it. Not in the way that Charlie did it. Charlie is irreplaceable. But we can at least have a team of people try to step into the gap and make sure that we're carrying this message to college campus, because if we don't do that, I think that's the way in which I worry about the assassin winning, is we've got to carry on the mantle, we've got to carry on the torch, and we've got to do it by continuing the message, that's why I'm doing this show today, is I just wanted to send a signal that we're not going to let Charlie's mantle be discarded. We're going to keep on carrying it. And one final thing that I wanted to talk about is, you mentioned Bobby Kennedy earlier, and obviously he was on the segment before you. What Charlie was so good at was marshaling political action into a policy outcome. Or a person outcome. And this is where I want to talk about Bobby. And so many of the really good nominees that we had, they weren't easy to get across the finish line. And that's no insult to our great nominees. Great people are actually always going to be a little bit harder. If it's a person who doesn't make any controversy, who doesn't say anything especially controversial, that person's going to be easy. But the president didn't want that. He wanted to staff the administration with people who had interesting things to say, who brought unique perspectives, and that meant that we were going to have some tough confirmation fights. Maybe, we've got about 2 minutes left. Talk a little bit about the role that Charlie played on the inside, on the outside, and making sure that all of these great nominations that we had actually got across the finish line in a town where we've got 53 GOP senators and we could only lose 3 for any particular nomination.
Well, I would say you and Charlie were a good tag team.
We were.
Let's take Bobby or Pete, for example.
Yep.
The president really didn't want a homogenized cabinet. He wanted different people that were, for whatever reason, a part of a movement that we need to keep. There were interest groups, there were coalitions and people that came to be Trump voters. We don't have an exact number, but it was certainly more than a few. And now we have 3.5 years to convert Trump voters to being Republicans.
Sure.
So that in 2028, we can keep the White House, the House, and the Senate. That's what Charlie helped us think through. I'll speak for myself. That's what Charlie helped me think through. Yes, his expertise was with young people, but he knew so much about everything. And he knew that there was this group of people we now call MAGA that were out there looking for a home. He found Bobby and introduced Bobby into our world. And now he's the Secretary of HHS. So that's the kind of thinking that we saw Charlie all the time do. And I think that the movement cannot be, or he cannot be replaced by any one person. He's got to be replaced by you, by Don Trump, by so many others that are good communicators and can be taking as well as giving.
You heard it from the White House Chief of Staff. It's up to all of us, including those in the audience, to keep on the legacy of Charlie Kirk. Next up, I have some closing thoughts to share about my dear friend. We will be right back. Thanks.
Have a great time. Thank you. Okay, hello, yes.
Hello, my name is Yardo. I have a small YouTube channel. I'm a political commentator as well, much smaller than you are. I just wanted to thank everybody at Turning Point USA, USD for having this debate. And also I would thank the Turning Point USA, San Diego State, because they gave a voice to one of my dear friends who was a victim at the October 7th Nova Music Festival, and his name is Muzai. I really appreciate that you guys did that, and you have my sincere gratitude. I'd also like to quickly state that this is a message for the far left first, and then we'll get into what I highly disagree with you about. But I just read Hassan Piker's New York Times article where he claims that he did not stifle free speech in his chat. I do not believe that's true because I was banned multiple times for having a simple disagreement with him. That is one thing on the right that you guys do far better, is not creating echo chambers, and this is a complete amazing thing that you guys are doing right now. And I just want to let you know, right now, Hassan Piker, I will donate $5,000 to Palestine if you debate me. Now, and I 100% mean that, and I will make sure that that is as public as possible. My question for you, Charlie, is I just want to make it clear, I am against affirmative action. Of course, I do not believe, as a disabled person myself, I do not believe that affirmative action is the entirety of what DEI entails. That being said, I would be fine with DEI gotten rid of if it meant like a true meritocracy in the United States. But why would I trust Donald Trump to create a meritocracy when he himself has appointed the least accomplished and the least, essentially, yeah, perfect word, the least accomplished cabinet in U.S. history, at least in my opinion. If you disagree, I can explain why I feel that way.
Well, first of all, one thing doesn't have to do with the other, but I'm going to reject the premise that it's the least qualified cabinet ever, so we could talk about that. But even if it was just Donald Trump picking his family members, it has nothing to do with the merits of DEI or getting rid of DEI, right? So that's a red herring. They actually have nothing one to do with the other. One's a repeal of a policy. One is your critique of a cabinet. So which one would you rather debate? Would you rather debate DEI and all of its implications or Trump's cabinet? It seems like you have more problems with Trump's cabinet because we actually might be on the same side of meritocracy. So want to talk about the cabinet? Whichever you prefer.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
All right.
I personally don't see it as a red herring, but we can talk about that.
Well,
sure.
yeah, one doesn't have anything to do with the other, right? I mean, you can personally have hypocrisy in your own life and still do really good things in policy, right? It doesn't necessarily equate, right?
Well, I mean, in the way that I see it is that when a lot of people talk about, like when they're talking about their choice to vote for Kamala or Trump instead of Kamala, they talk about the personal aspects of Donald Trump that make them want to trust him, right? A lot of people trust him. You can see the way that people look. I mean, everybody's wearing the MAGA hats. People trust him. Why would I trust him?
Okay. So yeah, that is your contention. So
yeah.
What about his cabinet is unqualified? Let me just ask you a couple examples. So, I mean, Scott Bessent, who's one of the most accomplished bond salesmen and individuals in the hedge fund space ever, right? That's not unqualified. Pete Hegseth, who's actually a frontline warfighter, unlike Lloyd Austin, who never fought a war in his life, right? We have Kristi Noem, who was an accomplished congresswoman and governor from a major state running Department of Homeland Security. You have Howard Lutnick, who's a very famous and well-known financial mind and titan from Wall Street running Cantor Fitzgerald. Marco Rubio, who was a very well-respected U.S. Senator on Foreign Affairs, who's now doing a great job as Secretary of State. So build out your argument why you think this cabinet is unqualified. Seems to me very, very qualified, actually, across the board.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to start with, I mean, this is the most obvious one, and I have many other examples that I'd like to get into, but Pete Hegseth, you mentioned, I think that is kind of
Shortly after Usha and I left Charlie's family and Charlie's remains in Arizona, I read a story in The Nation magazine about my dear friend Charlie Kirk. Now, The Nation isn't a fringe blog. It's a well-funded, well-respected magazine whose publishing history goes back to the American Civil War. George Soros's Open Society Foundation funds this magazine, as does the Ford Foundation and many other wealthy titans of the American progressive movement. The writer accuses Charlie of saying, and I quote, "Black women do not have brain processing power to be taken seriously." But if you go and watch the clip, the very clip she links to, you realize he never said anything like that. He never uttered those words. He made an argument against affirmative action as a policy. He criticized a specific Supreme Court justice as an individual. He never said anything about black women as a group. He made an argument for judging people of all races and backgrounds by their own individual merits. The very evidence she provides, this hack of a writer, shows that she lied about a dead man, and yet she wrote it. An esteemed magazine published it. It made it through the editors, and of course, liberal billionaires rewarded that attack. Now, of course, even if Charlie had uttered those words, it wouldn't mean that he deserved his fate. But consider the level of propaganda at work. Charlie was gunned down in broad daylight, and well-funded institutions of the left lied about what he said so as to justify his murder. This is soulless and evil. But I was struck not just by the dishonesty of this smear, but by the glee over a young husband's and young father's death. Quote, she says, "He was an unrepentant racist, transphobe, homophobe, and misogynist." The Nation wrote, who often wrapped his bigotry in Bible verses because there was no other way to pretend that it was morally correct. He had children, as do many vile people. That's what they said. He had children, as do many vile people. Now, hours before this smear was published, my wife and I had the honor of escorting Charlie's body back to his home in Arizona. We took his wife, Erica, we love you, his parents, his sister, and a few of his best friends with us. And as they offloaded Charlie's casket from Air Force Two, I worried that Erica would collapse with grief. Now, I am a very lucky husband to a very wonderful wife, but I have never been prouder of my wife than that moment as she held Erica in Erica's very darkest hour. And I thought of Erica as I read that disgusting attack on Charlie. He had children, as do many vile people. That's what they said about him. I said the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I asked Usha what Erica had said to her earlier in the day in a private moment, and I asked Erica's permission to share this. My wife told me, she asked me for advice. Erica asked me for advice on how she should tell her children that their father had been murdered. She asked my wife how to tell her beautiful kids that their father and my dear, very dear friend is no longer with us. And as she was doing it, there were people dancing on that father's grave. Now, I have heard many calls in the last few days for unity and for healing in the wake of Charlie's assassination. You have no idea how desperately I want that, how gratified I was when Democratic friends and even former Senate colleagues reached out to offer their condolences to me. I'm so thankful. And I know there are so many like them all across our great country. I am desperate to wrap my arms around them as we all unite to condemn political violence and the ideas that cause it. Psalm 133 tells us, "Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. It is like the precious ointment upon the head." Oh, how badly have I craved that precious ointment in recent days, and I believe we can have it. But first, we must tell the truth. It's the only way to honor Charlie, for what was he, if not a man who told the truth in every place, in every environment? Now, the most important truth Charlie told is this, that long ago a man, begotten, not made, came down from heaven, and by the Holy Spirit was incarnate of the Virgin Mary and became man. For our sake, he was crucified under Pontius Pilate and suffered death and was buried and rose again on the third day. Charlie believed, as I do, that all the truth he told flowed from that fundamental principle. I really do believe that we can come together in this country. I believe we must. But unity, real unity, can be found only after climbing the mountain of truth. And there are difficult truths we must confront in our country. One truth is that 24% of self-described, quote, very liberals believe it is acceptable to be happy about the death of a political opponent, while only 3% of self-described very conservatives agree. 3% is too many, of course. Another truth is that 26% of young liberals believe political violence is sometimes justified, and only 7% of young conservatives say the same. Again, too high a number. In a country of 330 million people, you can, of course, find one person of a given political persuasion justifying this or that or almost anything. But the data is clear. People on the left are much likelier to defend and celebrate political violence. This is not a both sides problem. If both sides have a problem, one side has a much bigger and malignant problem, and that is the truth we must be told. That problem has terrible consequences. The leader of our party, Donald J. Trump, escaped an assassin's bullet by less than an inch. Our House Majority Leader, Stephen Scalise, came within seconds of death by an assassin himself. And now, the most influential conservative activist in generations, our friend Charlie, has been murdered. This violence, it doesn't come from nowhere. Now, any political movement, violent or not violent, is a collection of forces. It's like a pyramid that stacks on top, one support on top of the other. That pyramid's got a foundation of donors, of activists, of journalists, now of social media influencers, and of course of politicians. Not every member of that pyramid would commit a murder. In fact, over 99%, I'm sure, would not. But by celebrating that murder, apologizing for it, and emphasizing not Charlie's innocence, but the fact that he said things some didn't like, even to the point of lying about what he actually said, many of these people are creating an environment where things like this are inevitably going to happen. A couple of months ago, I headlined a fundraiser in Southern California, and since, we'd be out there anyways, my wife and I decided to take our kids to Disneyland one weekend. We had fun, and to be clear, most of the guests said very nice things, or they just left us alone. But there was a loud and very vocal minority that would shout at my children, who were 8, 5, and 3, whenever they got the opportunity. "You should disown your dad, you little shit," one middle-aged woman yelled at my 5-year-old. "Tell the Secret Service to protect the Constitution, not your father," screamed another. Are these women violent? Probably not. Are they deranged? Certainly. And while our side of the aisle certainly has its crazies, it is a statistical fact that most of the lunatics in American politics today are proud members of the far left. After Charlie died, one of his friends and one of our senior White House staffers had left-leaning operatives in his neighborhood passing out leaflets telling people what he looked like and where he lived, encouraging neighbors to harass him or, God forbid, to do worse. While he was mourning his dead friend, he and his wife had to worry about the political terrorists drawing a big target on the home he shares with his young children. Are these people violent? I hope not. But are they guilty of encouraging violence? You damn well better believe it. We can thank God that most Democrats don't share these attitudes, and I do, while acknowledging that something has gone very wrong with a lunatic fringe, a minority, but a growing and powerful minority on the far left. There is no unity with people who scream at children over their parents' politics. There is no unity with someone who lies about what Charlie Kirk said in order to excuse his murder. There is no unity with someone who harasses an innocent family the day after the father of that family lost a dear friend. There is no unity with the people who celebrate Charlie Kirk's assassination. And there is no unity with the people who fund these articles, who pay the salaries of these terrorist sympathizers, who argue that Charlie Kirk, a loving husband and father, deserved a shot to the neck because he spoke words with which they disagree. Did you know that the George Soros Open Society Foundation and the Ford Foundation, the groups who funded that disgusting article justifying Charlie's death, do you know they benefit from generous tax treatment? They are literally subsidized by you and me, the American taxpayer. And how do they reward us? By setting fire to the house built by the American family over 250 years. I am desperate for our country to be united in condemnation of the actions and the ideas that killed my friend. I want it so badly that I will tell you a difficult truth. We can only have it with people who acknowledge that political violence is unacceptable, and when we work to dismantle the institutions that promote violence and terrorism in our own country. Now, our government, you heard me talk to Stephen Miller about this, will be working very hard to do exactly that in the months to come. We're not always going to get it right. We will sometimes move more slowly than you would like. We will sometimes move more slowly than I want us to. But I promise you that we will explore every option to bring real unity to our country and stop those who would kill their fellow Americans because they don't like what they say. But you have a role too. Civil society, Charlie understood this well, is not just something that flows from the government. It flows from each and every one of us. It flows from all of us. So when you see someone celebrating Charlie's murder, call them out in hell. Call their employer. We don't believe in political violence, but we do believe in civility. And there is no civility in the celebration of political assassination. Get involved. Get involved. Get involved. It's the best way to honor Charlie's legacy. Start a chapter of TPUSA or get involved in the one that already exists. If you're older, volunteer for your local party, write an op-ed in your local paper, run for office. I can't promise you this is going to be easy. I can't promise you that all of us will avoid Charlie's fate. I can't promise you that I will avoid Charlie's fate. But the best way to honor him is to shine the light of truth like a torch in the very darkest places. Go do it. We owe it to our friend to ensure that his killer is not just prosecuted but punished. And the worst punishment is not the death penalty, but the knowledge that Charlie's mission continues after he's gone. St. Paul tells us in the book of Ephesians to put on the full armor of God. Let all of us put on that armor and commit ourselves to that cause for which Charlie gave his life, to rebuild a united States of America, and to do it by telling the truth.